Now, just to begin with, I think I will stand, although I feel very tempted to sit down, but yeah, I will stand so I can see. Just a few words. I'm Lia Ghilardi. I've been working with this approach to placemaking that we call cultural planning, and now increasingly planning culturally on my side. For about 20 years now. Yeah, no, it's not 20 years. It's since the year 2000, really. Now, I am not an artist, so I can claim that to belong to this kind of illustrious group of people. I studied sociology in Italy. But studying sociology in Italy at the time when I studied, and I'm not giving you the time, otherwise you say how old she is. At the time when I studied sociology, then we basically occupied the university for 4 years while I was there. So we did very little study and we did a lot of practice. So we were out there all the time, going to talk to workers in factories, going to talking to other students, organizing our struggles to improve how the university worked, to improve the conditions of people who lived in the town where we were at university. So that was my background in sociology, and if you want, then I expanded this into urban sociology, and later on when I moved to London from Italy, when I moved to London, I studied with Peter Hall, the urbanist, and I never completed my PhD, so I'm not an academic either, but I've been teaching for many years. So I'm a bit of a hybrid, if you see what I mean, a kind of contemporary hybrid. I'm a nobody and nothing, but yet again, I've been working for 20 years with a strange practice, which is fairly interdisciplinary. And it really involves looking at places from a kind of 360-degree angle, which is not your normal top-down, tick the box, and do a plan type of thing. Maybe I borrowed this from my kind of practice of student protests. Right, next. Just like Mick earlier, just to situate the kind of a few points that I'm gonna make later on, just 2 or 3 words about the context. Don't be afraid, you see the slides there, but I'm not gonna talk through the slides, all of them. I'm just gonna talk about 1 or 2 things. Okay, this is a joke, it's got inverted commas. So everybody, all my colleagues, big sociologists, big urban sociologists, geographers, everybody agree that we are really now going through what we call almost like an urban revolution. Why? Mainly because of urbanization. Now, I would like to question this because, ever since you can think of, even in the Middle Ages, we had cosmopolitan cities, we have movements of people, massive movements of people from the countryside into cities and vice versa at different times in history. But it seems like for some reason it's got even worse, this urbanization process, even worse since the 2008 crisis. So we like to think that in the field of urban sociology. So I leave it to you, you can make up your mind. But what is interesting for me is this kind of statistic that, okay, half of the population now lives in city. We are all afraid, really, because we're all different, and God knows what happens. We're not anymore in the hands of the kind of the big man, the solid Swedish kind of top-down. Trust me, I am the best. I'm the social democrat. I know what I'm doing here. So we are not in that world anymore. But we are in a world of diversity. So we have many cultures, many lifestyles, people with different aspirations, expectations, etc. They all come into our cities. Fascinating. But what we are saying is just 600 of these big cities make up 60% of the global economic output. That tells you also that there are top dog cities and there are bottom dog cities. More important cities, less important cities. Just as in society, things are panning out in that way. Is it really an urban revolution? Well, you could argue it is also a rural revolution, because right now we have something like 48,000 square kilometers of peri-urban areas, which is like those areas, those little towns outside Gothenburg, the Skaraborg region, for example. I would say it's a peri-urban region, or area, or sub-region if you want, but it's not rural anymore. So what I'm saying is that the rural has been eaten up by the urban, etc., is advancing. But what that means that we have vast areas of peri-urban spaces that culturally are characterized by a certain type of lifestyle, income, people, etc. They are your kind of kingdom of horses, kingdom of golf kind of thing. Pretty places. We love them, aren't they? Yeah, but they are there. And they are big, and they are growing faster, actually, than the cities are growing these days. So more and more people are now thinking, I've had the big city, I've had enough of this diversity. I quite fancy a little bit of peri-urban area, kingdom of horses, and running my own stable and doing whatever, playing tennis, and so on. So within this urban revolution, I think, from my perspective as a sociologist and as a cultural planner, the most important thing is also the kind of cultural diversity that we're going to encounter on our daily basis. So the key point here, we are not living in cohesive cities, or in this mythology that, in the 19th century, if I was a nation, I had a heritage which was solid, and it was there for me to touch and identify with. These days, this notion of heritage handed down by the politicians, also by the cultural institutions of those countries, I'm afraid has imploded. So your museums, etc., will need or have already probably become much different than what they were in the 1950s and so on. So diversity is key, and it's an opportunity also. Now, in terms of economic development or regression, if you want to call it, it seems to me one day I wake up and I think we are in the Middle Ages, and in terms of the development of capitalism, the next day I wake up and I think I'm in the 22nd century, where work will be abolished by technology. Anyway, whichever way you go, or whichever way you choose to interpret it, the fact is that there are cities, and the cities are becoming the locus, the center of where the gap between the rich and poor, those that have money, those that don't have money, those that can participate in the cultural life of places, and those that cannot participate, is evidence, and it's big, it is large. So we have opportunities for some of us, and I think most of us here, have incredible opportunities out of this kind of system, out of these trends, etc. But there would be masses of population that would not have these opportunities, and the consequences could be bleak. Or, if you look at a different perspective, we could be going through really a complete regeneration of the way we live in cities, which is how I would like to see it. Together with this, we have a kind of devolution of powers, devolution of governance to the regions, and cities are becoming more like city-states, just like in the Middle Ages also. And that's not bad in a sense, if you think of the power of the mayors in some cities to make policies and to decide on budgets, etc. So it's much easier these days to govern and to put in place systems of governance that are flatter or more networked than it was 50 or 100 years ago. So this kind of resurgence of the city and the regions could be an opportunity for us to put in place different kind of levels of governance that are more democratic, participatory, etc. But what are the challenges? So, because we have to be pragmatic, we have to see first the challenges and then see how we could tackle those challenges. I don't mean finding solutions. I mean, tackle those challenges or look at those challenges from different perspectives. Well, here is, I mean, you can see, I work a lot with planners, I work a lot with architects as well, I work a lot with artists. But when I work with policymakers, planners, and the people who do urban governance, the first thing I notice is in their plans, I'm not talking bullshit here, in their plans, the people are not there. What is there is the plan. What is there is the fear, the actual, I mean, it's like watching I don't know, a thriller or something, and reading an investment plan or reading a master plan or something for some cities. It's like the terror of the competition of the other city. The other city will attract more people and therefore more revenue. And therefore the politicians can be re-elected, the politicians can play with more money, blah, 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 blah. The other cities always have the best station, train station, the best transport, they have the best supermarkets, they have whatever it is, leisure facilities, cultural facilities also. So cultural infrastructure is becoming more and more important. As you well know, the kind of, in the urban competitiveness, the top of the list, really, of the aspiration things is to be a city of culture in Europe. And we have seen many, many European cities succeeding and going. Do you know which one is city of culture this year? Sorry? Sorry, pass. Okay? And I'm supposed to be an expert. I'm not joking. Pass. I can't think right now. I asked you the question because I can't think. Okay? No, that's interesting. Sorry, guys, but you imagine whoever is doing and being City of Culture, we are now in April, and they probably started in December last year, and they took over the baton from somewhere else. And they probably have invested God knows how much citizens' money into arenas, into big airports, into squares, into public art. Gee, public art is key, because you need to have an environment that is really conducive to bring in the tourists there, and the tourists wowing them and saying, wow, your cow was better than the one in Liverpool. I love that cow in the middle of the road there. What the cow has to do with Liverpool, or what the spider has to do with the buildings or the kind of heritage of this big city, which was the top city in terms of culture, also for the British country, etc. In the 19th century, God only knows. Sorry, I'm not an artist, as I said. We can have a heated debate about this. I would love it. What concerns me when I work with cities large and small, is the unintended consequences of what they do. The unintended consequences. One thing, and I'm not going to go on long with this. Think of London. I live in London. Now, I come from Italy, a small town in Italy. Now, why am I in London? God only knows. It's 32 years, so by now I got used to it. But what is coming out now is a systemic lack of housing in London. Systemic. I mean, it's like there is a hunger for houses that is unprecedented. But at the same time, you have pressure from people coming from all over the country to find jobs, because the economy of the UK is not what it used to be. So we need to find jobs. Big cities are a pool of potential fantastic jobs that are there waiting for you if you have the qualifications, etc. But there is nowhere to live in London. And now think of this, 36,000 homes in London. 36,000 homes in central London, Mayfair, near Piccadilly, for those of you, just to get a sense, are in the hands of Russian mafia, drug dealers, people who work in the city of London and have put the money in offshore companies and leave those houses empty. 36,000 homes empty in the center of London alone. Now, that is the consequence of what happened in the 1980s when people deregulated the financial sector in London. By deregulating the financial sector, everything else that was not industry was then measured as a value on what you could get by playing the stock exchange. And by having so much liquidity, lots of people have invested their liquidity in those little flats in that city. So we, the people who would like to live in London and could contribute to the country, to the city, innovate, to whatever we could do for them, we cannot do that simply because we are held ransom, really, by a bunch of criminals, effectively. Okay? Unintended consequences of what something that was done in the past. The planning bill that has just been passed 3 months ago during the Christmas holidays, just after the Christmas holidays, by the government in the UK. I'm only giving you examples from the UK because I don't want to get into the polemic about what is happening in Sweden or in Denmark or other places. So the UK is far enough, I think, for you. The planning bill that has passed now, it means that the developers do not even have to ask anymore for planning permission. So we have a complete Far West of kind of building homes in an environment in which ordinary people, skilled people, etc., need homes. So unintended consequences, and these unintended consequences govern and are the default position of our planners, of our governors of cities. They are really the, I would say, the ABC of the people, the professionals, if you want, the housing experts, or those that are expert in parks, but they are also the default position of the culture people, the people who work in cultural institutions, the people who come and tell you, gee, you know what, I now have to go and ask the Black and Asian community to bring in their exhibits or bring in something from their home in order to tick the box. Otherwise, the Arts Council is not going to give me the funding. So we are dealing with arts and cultural institutions who have the same system of thinking. They want to attract the same kind of tourism, just like London wants to attract a certain kind of investor. So, and very few people are questioning it or challenging this. Well, I am. So, but what will be the ideal city? What is there then that remains of this idea of the city? What remains to me is a few basic things. And here I go back, not entirely sharing what Patrick Geddes, I mean, it's Scottish to begin with, so suspicious to the British anyway. But, okay, so a biologist, a botanist, a polymath, okay? When he's asked at the end of the 19th century to look at the plan for Edinburgh, the old town of Edinburgh, he said, okay, guys, we, just like Jane Jacobs said in the 1960s then, we cannot just take that central part of Edinburgh from the physical perspective alone. If we talk about place-making, city-making, we have to talk about the three elements. We have to look at how people live there, folk, how people interact with that environment, how people respond to that environment right now. So we have to observe, inquire, investigate what people are doing there and now. Also, we have to look at the economic conditions, who is in work, who is not in work, where is industry, where is not, where is agriculture, but also place, the geography, the topography, etc. These have to go together. So we need to adopt a holistic perspective if we want to talk about place making. I think I share that view with him. And then later on, Louis Mumford, the urbanist, also said something interesting that may be relevant also in terms of art and art and the city, if you see what I mean. He always thought that the city is, he said, a conscious work of art. Because it's really a play. Well, that was Geddes, really. The city is a drama in time, also, he said. So almost like a play in the theater. But here we're saying it's a work of art because in it, each individual person who lives in a place leaves a mark in that place. And that mark is also an expression of their needs, desires, aspirations, need for identity or for changing their identity, for becoming something else. So the city is your own work of art. So here is the link between the social, the physical, the work, the folk, and the place. Once again, coached in this language of art as well. But to me, obviously, the lessons I'm drawing just from reading these two classic texts, really, is that the city is a system of relations. It cannot just be reduced to the kind of physical infrastructure, and therefore it cannot be, in terms of governance, done top-down, as it used to be. Here is the plan, that's what we're going to do. This is the linear kind of way we're going to implement it, and let's hope for the best, unintended consequences once again. Okay, so we have to really, really start thinking. The city is a system of relations. It's an ecosystem, if you prefer it. If you don't like that analogy, don't use it. But to me, hardware and software have to go together. They are together. They are the blood in the bloodstream of the city. So the walls and your kind of old style city-state, the army in the old style military, everything has to be together with the civitas, the citizens, the people. They got to go together. So then, in my view, clearly, it's time that we started thinking differently. I'm not saying more innovatively, but there is no room for maneuver anymore. Believe you me, I have seen it. I've seen the signs in London in the 2011 riots that went on for about 3 months, and they were ugly. But you could understand from a sociological perspective, you could have foreseen them. So since I'm staring down at a kind of urban place, which is more and more violent and more marked by gaps between rich and poor and blah, 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 I'm saying, okay, guys, I'm not that pessimistic. I need something to hold on to. And this notion that the city is a system of relations, it's a work of art, if you want, we are going to make that work of art happening. Now, what method we use, it's indifferent at this stage, whether we want more artists to work with it, less artists. I have one way of doing it, and the principles are here to be questioned, etc., of course. Economic development, okay, because we talk about cities are economic machines. They are machines for getting revenue. Yes, of course they are, if we want to be pragmatic. But they need also to be about growing resilient communities. They have to be about growing their people. They have to be about supporting each of our individual capacity to become human beings, to become citizens, etc. No more business with this kind of unfettered capitalism. Resilient, it means also capable of adapting to changes. Okay, so we are doing that indirectly, because if we look at our careers, probably, I know for sure in the past 20 years I've had 4 different careers, and I'm still here standing and I'm full of energy, I think. So, it means also trying to, this notion of resilience is not just simply that one of the smart city, which is so dry and so distant maybe from us, from our lives. It's bringing down that notion of sustainability to the human beings, to every single one of us. It means giving each of us the opportunities to become whatever we want to become. So it's a profoundly humanistic message, But as I said, 30 years ago, if I heard myself saying this, I would have said, the woman has sold out big time, because I was out there protesting with the students. But now I think that's what I think. So planning, therefore, has to be about people and the social and intercultural networks that we can create. So culture is all over. Culture is in the mainstream. It's in the bloodstream. It's everywhere here. So what notion of cultural planning, if you want, have I been used? This is something I wrote in 2001. Things have slightly changed now, but I think I still believe this. And this, we need in planning, in city making, to adopt a people-centered approach to local development. We need to do that. Otherwise we fail, otherwise we'll be forever dealing with kind of unintended consequences. And it needs to be based on a deep understanding of the local cultural, social, and economic resources of that place. It needs to be based on a deep understanding, a deep mapping, what I call it, of the DNA of that place. And that means that we don't do a plan for a city just based on the idea we need 20,000 new homes in order to attract that million kronas investment in revenue, because that ain't gonna happen. Because the world is changing so fast that one small thing can influence your big plan big time. So we need to think in a more iterative way, step by step, essentially. We need to start thinking in terms of experiments on small scale. And these experiments are experiments that are conducted not for the community, but by the community. So it's a kind of renewed call for activism, community activism. Now, whether you have artists working there, I think it's very important, because artists can bring in a very interesting, new, innovative, creative perspectives on a resource, on a place, on a reading of a place, on the history of the place, on the heritage of the place, etc. But we need to stop also thinking, which to me it's slightly pernicious idea that you can do a city for people. And I loved my colleague Young Girl. I worked with them in the past 6 years, etc. But I hate this sanitization of places that is implied in the idea of cities for people. And what it comes down is to take away the cars and everybody will be happy, pedestrianize everything. I mean, have you seen what happens in some cities when you pedestrianize things? Crime, poof, goes up like that. Elderly people magged day and night. Okay. No, it's not automatic, but it can happen. So it's one of the unintended consequences. And for planners and urban thinkers to automatically default position, cities for people, delete the car. We don't want the car. What about my neighbors, Jamaican neighbors, who only have one car and rely on that to get to work? Because public transport is so expensive. So, guys, we need to, So it's cities by people? No, I wanted to talk about PARK LEK. Okay, now I skip all the rest. Two things about PARK LEK. Why is it good? But if you want the presentation, you can have it. You can have a look, and we can continue the debate eventually. But you can see why I like PARK LEK. Why do you think? No. It's coming. Why? Why do you think? Let's just look at this. Why? First thing, it's not a one-off project. I have to say, I hate one-off projects. It's becoming my pet hate these days. The little saunas in Frihamnen, fantastic. But what's the big plan? What happens afterwards? Housing development, gentrification, unfettered. Okay? You get the message. So these guys, you guys, were in there for the long haul. You are embedded in those neighborhoods. So you are committed. You know, I was reading Badiou, the French philosopher. I don't normally read French philosophers these days, but I happen to read this book, In Praise of Love. And for him, love in political terms is commitment. Commitment. So you guys had commitment. So you went in for that. And you had this incredible kind of way of questioning what was going on. And the people gave you a lot. They gave you a lot. Now, I'm suffering. And I was really touched by what you guys said today. Because I'm thinking, hey, what is happening now? Why is that school privatized or something? Why couldn't we stop that from happening? Well, we couldn't stop that from happening because we are not there now. Okay, so something there has to be thought about how we do governance. How do we embed these experiments in new living, in social living, etc., in the future? How do we embed them in the bloodstream of planning and local governance? Okay, so you navigated conflicts, amazing, really. So, but I think you exploded the traditional idea of consultation in planning. I loved that. I was like, yeah, high five, yes. But to me, it's the embodiment of planning culture. I couldn't recommend it more. But I cannot go home now on the plane and think, they did well. That's it, finished. Because it's not. It cannot end like this. The question is how? Do we go back and occupy the places? Or do we go back and bring a whole kind of system of artists and a big gathering of activists, etc.? What do we do? Do we bring the policymakers out here? So I think there has to be that debate. And I have finished that. So.
Thank you.